As a BTS fan, you may have heard the following quote in relation to the varied styles and personalities found in the BTS rap line. RM analyzes the world, Suga criticizes the world, J-Hope makes his own world. Admittedly, I don't know where this oft-repeated comment originated from, but it's not uncommon to see it in the comment section of videos pertaining to the rap line or any of its members. Of course, RM, Suga, and J-Hope aren't exclusively locked into these boxes, and all three of them have engaged in some form of each. Even so, this comment has always intrigued me, especially the part about J-Hope. In my opinion, while the comment fits all three rappers very well, it feels even more appropriate for J-Hope, who actually has described his style and personal attitude as a world in and of itself, giving it the rather fitting moniker of Hope World. In fact, this is the name of his first mixtape, released in 2018, as well as the opening track of that album, serving as an introduction to his vision and what he stands for. J-Hope has since released two other albums, Jack in the Box and Hope on the Street, released in 2022 and 2024 respectively, both of which continue to bolster this vision. Each album has its own unique flair, with Jack in the Box musically very different from Hope World, and Hope on the Street being described as a soundtrack that continues the spirit of J-Hope's street dancing project of the same name. However, they all share similarities, showing how J-Hope has continued to grow as both an artist and an individual. Some songs on Jack in the Box are even considered by J-Hope himself as sequels to ones on Hope World, such as Equal Sign being seen as a continuation of the earlier Piece of Peace. Even though Hope World may on the whole be lighter than the stylistically darker Jack in the Box, it still has shades of the struggles and the longing that we see in later tracks, allowing these songs to flow into one another in interesting ways. Even more interesting, however, are the sources of inspiration that J-Hope has deliberately used to flesh out this hopeful and fascinating world. And for today's analysis, I am particularly interested in the books he references throughout his musical journey. Obviously, J-Hope's music has its roots in and draws inspiration from a large variety of sources. Throughout his BTS solo songs and his albums, he highlights his childhood, his family, his moral code, his life as both Jung Ho-seok and J-Hope of BTS and the trials therein, as well as in the world around him. All of these things contributing to his story. The literature that he references is just a small part of the whole, but I think these references are all brilliant, as they help to convey his thoughts and feelings about complex topics in very clever ways, making these topics both clearer and more relatable, while also keeping them relevant to his own story. It's not an easy feat, but it's one that J-Hope does perfectly. So today, in honor of our hopeful rapper coming home, I'd like to explore these sources of inspiration and what I think they tell us about the songs that grew from them. What can we learn from the clever ways he employs these references? And what do some of the biggest references tell us about J-Hope and Jung Ho-seok? So I hope you'll join me today as we journey along with J-Hope through his hopeful world and unpack the incredible tales that inspired it. Part 1. References in Hope World and Jack in the Box. Before I get to the major literary reference I want to explore in this video, let's talk about some of the smaller references throughout J-Hope's albums and why they're so relevant. In Hope World, many of these references appear in the song Daydream. Here, J-Hope compares following the metaphorical path to his daydreams to the path that leads to Hogwarts, a reference to the magical school in the Harry Potter series, as well as the hole that Alice fell into, referring to the plot of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In the song, he describes his daydreaming not as maladaptive daydreaming or something that comes from feeling dissatisfaction, but rather the simple act of drawing a different picture of his life. Not only does this feel accurate given the wonderful worlds these two pieces of literature sketch, but it also encourages us to see J-Hope as an explorer of these other paths, not dissimilar to Alice journeying through Wonderland. There is also another literature reference in the music video. During a scene where J-Hope is shown in space, floating above the world, he answers a phone call from someone identified as Arthur, a reference to Arthur Dent from the novel series The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The phone likewise displays an iconic phrase from the series, "Don't panic," which in the book series is printed on the titular Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in an effort to keep intergalactic travelers calm. Once again, it feels fitting to reference this iconic literary moment in this context, as J-Hope tries to navigate and manage how much he can daydream, not to mention how these daydreams fit into his daily life. Hope World's literary references really make it feel like the literature and the lessons found there are part of J-Hope's world and vision. However, the references don't stop in this mixtape. While not as numerous, there are also meaningful literary references in Jack in the Box. For instance, there is a brief reference to the children's book The Giving Tree in the song Safety Zone. The book is about the relationship between an apple tree and a young boy who takes various things that the tree offers him over the years, often sparking questions about the nature of giving and taking. Meanwhile, Safety Zone explores the desire to have a safety zone in life, and uses the example of the Giving Tree as J-Hope acknowledges that such generosity has definitely existed in his life, but that he nevertheless wonders where the stump of the tree is that he can use as a safe place. Given the various interpretations of the Giving Tree, I think J-Hope's use of it as a metaphor in Safety Zone is even more profound, and represents how difficult it can be to find a safe haven in the modern world. It's only mentioned in a single line of the song, but the metaphor is nevertheless incredibly evocative. An example of a slightly more fleshed out reference comes in the song Stop. Stop's Korean title translates to There Are No Bad People in the World, a reference to a book by Korean author Won Jae-hoon, which J-Hope discussed having purchased during his 2021 birthday broadcast and discussed again in his album review for Jack in the Box. He even uses this line verbatim during the song, and uses the idea as a jumping-off point to explore human nature. The song discusses how easy it is to abandon the idea that there are no bad people in the world when you're confronted with the horrible realities of day-to-day life. But through the lyrics, J-Hope makes a deliberate effort to remind himself of the factors we don't often see that can lead to these things. He then expands this discussion even more, pointing out the anger that permeates even the smaller facets of life in a way not dissimilar to the BTS rap line song Ugh. By framing these things through the concept of there are no bad people in the world, J-Hope not only points out the struggle with anger in our world, but encourages people, as the song's title suggests, to stop and make the conscious choice to change. It's a very powerful message, delivered in a way that only J-Hope could. But, for as terrific as all these references are, they are relatively minor when compared to the biggest literary reference he employs. For that, we need to return to Hope World, both as a mixtape and as a song, to explore the first invitation we get to submerge ourselves, literally, in J-Hope's music. Part 2. Captain Nemo, J-Hope, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In addition to the references I mentioned earlier, Hope World heavily makes use of themes and elements from the 1870 science fiction novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. This reference is both very obvious and clearly deliberate. The album is opened by the track of the same name, and the first thing we hear at the start of this track is a sort of underwater sound, implying we are diving to the depths of the ocean with J-Hope as our captain. This is something he discussed in his live broadcast about the mixtape, stating he used the novel as a motif, especially for the first song. He then goes on to expand upon this when discussing the mixtape in an article for Time magazine. In that interview, J-Hope gets candid about the novel as a source of inspiration and says the following. I remember being captivated by Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I read it as a kid. I think I took myself back to that place for new inspiration and brought back a part of it as the motive to start writing Hope World. It's an introduction to people who are brand new to me, with me as Captain Nemo showing you around just as the submarine in the book cruised around the world's oceans. I know this might sound really corny, but I invite you to pretend to be Professor Aronnax as you listen to this song and take a journey through my world. Far from being corny, however, I think this description casts the album in a brilliant light, especially because the story of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea actually fits J-Hope and his message surprisingly well. The story is told from the point of view of a French marine biologist and professor named Pierre Aronnax, who becomes part of an expedition to hunt down a huge sea creature. By circumstance, Aronnax and two of his friends are tossed overboard while their vessel is attempting to pursue the creature, and are shocked to discover their prey is not a marine animal at all, but a highly advanced mechanical vessel. They are brought inside this vessel, which turns out to be a submarine called the Nautilus, under the command of the highly enigmatic Captain Nemo, who allows them to stay on board under the condition that they never leave. While his two companions resent this, Aronnax is eager to not only learn more about the oceans in this unprecedented manner, but to learn more about Captain Nemo, who is not only the creator of the vessel, but who seems adamant in keeping the vessel separate from the rest of the world. So, when J-Hope encourages us as his listeners to be like Aronnax, he's encouraging us primarily to open our minds to the new and wondrous world that awaits us. Hence the line in the first song that runs, "Everyone is Aronnax, I'm Captain Nemo." Not only does this imply that J-Hope has the power to dazzle people, but it also sets him up as the creative master of his own domain. In the novel, one of the biggest differences between Nemo and Aronnax is that the latter is limited in his thinking. Nemo even describes Aronnax as someone who is always the same, and as someone who only sees difficulties and obstacles. In that way, J-Hope, like Captain Nemo, is encouraging us to break out of our limitations and begin thinking of our world and ourselves in different ways. For instance, when talking about the mixtape's second track, Piece of Peace, he says he wants to encourage people to find peace within themselves and be happy with their lives, but this message is not conveyed in a way that erases pain. Instead, it conveys that Jung Ho-suk saw and understood this pain and became J-Hope in part to offer hope against it. This is a theme we also see in Jack in the Box, where he examines where his hopeful identity came from. I think this theme leads us to some truly fascinating similarities between the story of Captain Nemo and J-Hope's own story, which makes the motif even more meaningful. Throughout the novel, one of the biggest mysteries is just who Captain Nemo is and where he comes from, and it is slowly revealed that he considers himself as hailing from an oppressed nation. He makes it his mission, therefore, to help those who are also repressed. Furthermore, the crew of the Nautilus is itself diverse, and it can be assumed that most, if not all of them, have likewise suffered oppression, as Nemo himself has. While I don't want to rely too heavily on the novel and Captain Nemo as motifs, nor do I want to overly emphasize their impact on the mixtape, I can't help but marvel at how much this attribute of Nemo really fits J-Hope and BTS as a concept. When BTS was first formed, their name of Bulletproof Boy Scouts signified their desire to shield and protect the youth who, like them, were subjected to unfair prejudices. Their goal was to take the bullets, i.e. the hatred and condemnation, that were otherwise thrown at these people. Over the years, this has changed method and has manifested in many ways, but the core of defending the helpless has carried through from BTS's earliest days to their later work. In Captain Nemo's case, this mission is revealed to be as much mercy for those who are oppressed as it is anger against the oppressors, especially those who have ruined his own life. In fact, throughout the novel, he displays incredible hatred and malice against those who have wronged him, and Aronnax eventually comes to see Nemo as a sort of avenging angel. For that reason, it almost feels like J-Hope is able to surpass Captain Nemo, for he refuses to give in to the anger and hatred that might otherwise be easy to fall into while experiencing the unfairness of the world. Instead, he goes out of his way to reject these things, as we see in Hope World's baseline or Jack in the Box's equal sign. Again, I don't want to stretch the reference to Captain Nemo to the point of absurdity, but it does provide a very good baseline, no pun intended, for how we can understand the persona of J-Hope as presented through his music. I believe part of what makes J-Hope's work so powerful is that he truly is inviting us into his own hopeful world through his songs, and this world is separate and removed from the prejudices of the real world, just like the Nautilus is similarly removed from society. I've discussed this topic before as a theme in BTS's work at large, so having it present in solo works such as J-Hope's makes perfect sense to me. More than that, many of the issues he discusses in his albums feel right at home in BTS's tapestry of social commentary. For instance, the struggles of youth and lack of opportunities that he discusses in Piece of Peace remind me of the topics BTS discusses in songs like Bapse or any of their early school-era tracks. Just like the Nautilus escapes the real world, but its crew and captain still work to champion the downtrodden, we too are invited to escape the limitations and hardships of the society we live in, whatever they may be. In fact, the motto of the Nautilus, Mobilis in Mobili, translates as moving within a moving element or changing with change. Like a living person, the ship is changing and creating change, and I think J-Hope's musical style is the perfect example of this type of unstoppable movement. In referencing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and casting his listeners as Aronnax, J-Hope makes two promises. The first is that he's going to lead us on an incredible journey to his own hopeful world. But the second is that he's going to challenge us to open our eyes and our minds to break out of our linear and limited thinking in the hopes of creating something better. That might be the best thing about the world that J-Hope has created through his music and through his actions. Not only is it a place of hope and peace that we can retreat to when we need it, but it serves as a reminder to try and create a better world. Hope takes many forms, and through his music and the references found there, I think J-Hope encourages us to explore them all as fully as we can. Obviously, this video is centered on the sources of inspiration J-Hope has found and layered into his work, but he himself has mentioned one major source I've yet to mention, and that would be his fellow BTS rappers RM and Suga. J-Hope credits RM and Suga with helping him develop his own love of music and his desire to have songs that he himself got to help write and produce. I think this not only proves that their unique abilities to see the world in different ways come together powerfully in their roles as part of BTS, but I think it shows that BTS's teamwork really does make the dream work. If J-Hope creates his own worlds and invites us to come with him on his adventures, I'm sure he's also bringing the other members of BTS along, and that makes it even more special to celebrate the completion of his military service. For that reason, and many others, it's a wonderful feeling to have our very own Captain Nemo back, ready to bring us hope once again. Welcome home, Jung Ho-suk. We've missed you. Now, to celebrate the return of our own Hope world, let's talk more about J-Hope's body of work and the interpretations behind it. How do you interpret the many references found throughout these songs? How do the songs themselves bring you hope and maybe even help you build your own Hope world? I'd love to hear all your thoughts and how you feel about J-Hope's return in general. Let's celebrate and show him some love. Until next time.